Okay, good afternoon and welcome back to CAWASA Wednesday water webinars and wherever you are across the Caribbean region. I know that we're already into February, but this is the first of our webinars for the year. So I'd like to wish all of you all the best for 2021 and hope it's a lot better than we had in 2020. I know that we are all still fighting the battle against the dreaded COVID pandemic. So let us keep safe. And we in the water and wastewater sector, we are on the front lines trying to provide that safety for our citizens by providing water and sanitation services. So you do keep safe with you and your families. Today's webinar is going to be presented by Dr. Jose Luis Bordes of Spain. And we want to thank Jose very much because it's already 9:05 in Spain PM. And he has taken the time off, quality family time, to be with us. So I'd like to thank him immensely on behalf of all of us. Dr. Jose Luis Bordes is formerly of the UN Habitats grouping called the Global Water Operators Partnerships Alliance, GWOPA, and CAWASA and CWWA form the CARIWOP in the Caribbean region. And that's where I got to know Dr. Jose Luis Martin Bordes. He is an urban engineer and having done quite a bit of work in the water sector in his country and with GWOPA. And he continues to be an international consultant with the UN Habitat. So I'd like to welcome you, Jose, and the floor is yours.
Well, good evening, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, everyone, and thank you so much, Ignatius, for inviting me to address the members of CAWASA to discuss an issue that I think it's important for all of you working at the utility level, which is wastewater monitoring, management and monitoring. And the reason why I'm here to address you on this topic today is because I rejoined UN Habitat recently to work with the office in Geneva on the topic of one of the indicators of the Sustainable Development Goals framework. And it's not a surprise that when we started to conceptualize how the monitoring of global wastewater information and data, we realized that this couldn't be done without involving wastewater utilities around the world, because you are those that are doing the work and you are those that are also generating this information. So I'm very much aware that this presentation today may sound and seem a little too abstract, because we are dealing with global databases, with global approaches, political processes in United Nations and so on. But let me reassure you that UN Habitat is actually trying to set up a dynamic internationally where this process should involve, as partners, water utilities and wastewater utilities around the world. And I may say that so far, or as far as I know, UN Habitat is the only UN agency or program that is directly supporting water utilities, providing capacity building and technical support in different areas. At least this is what GWOPA, this Global Alliance of Water Operators and Utilities, has been doing in the past years. So I think that the intersection between this high political level at the United Nations level and the conversation with wastewater utilities, wastewater professionals, and the sector is essential to move forward in the achievement of these global targets on water. So I am very thankful for the opportunity to be able to speak to you today about this topic. And although the angle or the perspective may seem in principle on the surface a little bit different from the language you use on a daily basis, and this is evolving and progressive conversation, right? And so this is our perspective from a global level, and then there is your own perspective from a very local level. And this is where I think we should together try to get closer in the analysis, in the conversation, in the discussion, and in even, I would say, finding the solutions, right, to the problems that countries are facing when it comes to sanitation and wastewater. So this was a very kind of try to be an honest introduction to my presentation. So you may not be disappointed by this UN approach, but we can, after my short presentation, have a discussion, and of course this will all be very useful for us. So I will start with my presentation. Some of these will be probably a bit too general, but I think it's always better to provide the context and then be more specific than just avoid these generalities that sometimes can also be of interest. Okay, so now this is when I'm going to share my screen. Mm-hmm. Okay. I guess you can see all the presentation now. Okay. So basically, I kind of introduced.
You gotta go to your slideshow now, Jose.
Sorry.
Slideshow. Do slideshow in your presentation. So.
Like this?
Yeah, great.
Okay, wait just a second. Sorry, allow me just a few seconds because I had some notes, and if I realize that if I share the full screen, it takes the entire...
Oh, I see. Okay, well, you go ahead your way then. Not
okay,
a problem.
But you can see the main slide, right?
Yes, we can.
It's just that you see the other slides on the margin. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, well, I introduced a little bit UN Habitat. It is the UN agency which is responsible for urban development. And of course, everything that has to do with urban water and wastewater and sanitation actually falls into the responsibility or the mandate of the organization. And it is also in this kind of, under this mandate that UN Habitat and UOPA has collaborated in the past with CAWASA and CWWA in trying to establish some kind of partnerships between water utilities so that there can be some kind of peer-to-peer learning between utilities, right? And this is actually the program through which I got to know CAWASA. So as I introduced before, this presentation will deal with wastewater treatment and monitoring and the global efforts to achieve SDG 6 and the indicator on wastewater safely treated. So now a few words on the background, and as I said, this is probably very general information for you, but I think it's important to mention it. Wastewater treatment and the monitoring of wastewater is still today a neglected area of the water cycle. And the sector as a whole has been suffering from many decades of neglect. And this has resulted into in an inadequate treatment and discharge to the environment in many countries, including developed countries. So now globally, we have passed the point where we need to move from a assimilative capacity of the environment that has been pushed to the limit, and then try to prepare some plans for the resilience of these systems. So, as you all know, wastewater is causing significant damage to the environment, and also some negative health impacts are starting to appear, even in developed economies. So, as new threats are being identified, for instance, in the form of priority pollutants, or in the case of emerging pathogenic substances, we need to keep track with wastewater management and treatment, because these pollutants may be cause of further harm. So in many countries, including the poorest countries in the world, access to water and sanitation has been the real focus so far. And of course, as I said, neglecting wastewater discharge or untreated wastewater discharge to the environment is now proving some catastrophic impacts in the environment. So, and you may be familiar with the polluter pays principle. That is a principle that has been around the world for some time. But if there is not adequate monitoring, the application of this principle is still very limited. So, and also once wastewater, untreated wastewater is discharged to into the sewer, and it ends on an open ocean or the rivers, tracing the source is even more difficult to ascertain, to identify. So basically, also in terms of technology advance, the way we treat wastewater has remained essentially unchanged for several years, aside from some small innovations. So there are few advances in technology to monitor and treat wastewater, but going or scaling up the practice has proven a challenge. And this is where we go to the core of the discussion today. Without having good data, it is very difficult to being able to design more advanced systems. It's just very difficult to do, right? So another issue in terms of water systems is that aside from treatment, wastewater collection also deserves some further attention. So far, sewer networks are limited at the global level, and many of those are still remain unconnected to the with treatment plants. So some of these networks still rely on on-site sanitation. So still also many urban settings still use combined sewerage, which tend to receive wastewater beyond their design capacity. So these are problems that are part of daily life, right, of a utility. But nonetheless, there is also an issue of political awareness or political sensitivity about wastewater. It remains unattractive to investors as compared to water supply, for instance. So attention is often focused on water supply at the expense of sanitation. And as an example, in the Caribbean, utilities are largely government-owned. So the issue of investment is more of one of affordability by national governments. But of course, we can discuss this later on, and you can share your ideas about this. So having set the problems related to wastewater, we see a lot of potential and potential benefits of wastewater management and monitoring. So if there is a continuous and effective measurement and monitoring of collected and treated wastewater, this can actually inform management decisions and investments at the local level. So we go back to the importance of having wastewater data and be able to analyze this data and inform decisions, especially at the political level, and those decisions that would lead to investment. So, but not only that, of course, these decisions that can be made with good and valid data can also support, for instance, decisions on the protection of the environment, actions that can ensure collective health of the communities, and in some cases also to support the transition to sustainable circular economies. So to have more of a kind of an integrated approach to wastewater management. And of course, impacts on climate change adaptation. So some examples of the potential of an efficient wastewater management and monitoring program are on the slide. For instance, valuing wastewater and its reuse as a way of augmenting freshwater resources where these are scarce. Reducing costs by understanding how the systems are interconnected and promoting alternative wastewater management strategies. So there is also this cost effectiveness behind having a good sewage system. And then, of course, regarding the environment, it's important to be able to quantify both in terms of volume, but also in terms of quality, what are the discharges to the environment, and what is the extent of the pollution. But of course, it's important to also be able to distinguish which part of this percentage of pollution found in water bodies comes from sewers and what comes from other sources, right? So, and as you know very well, also wastewater monitoring can alert from a possible treatment malfunction and reduction of pollutant loads discharge when this is properly done. And last but not least, recent global developments show that wastewater monitoring in some countries has been instrumental in identifying sources of hotspots of viruses that can be traced in the DNA and ARN, like the SARS-CoV-2, like COVID-16. And you are probably, as Ignatius mentioned before, you are at the front line of this, and as you know, there have been several studies that were able to correlate the presence of genetic material in the wastewater with, to be able to trace a little bit the extension of the epidemic at the city level. So this variable has become now very important for not only national governments and health authorities, but also has attracted the attention of international agencies and donors and financiers that want to see probably a bit more of development in the wastewater monitoring sector to be able to capture this epidemic capacity of wastewater monitoring systems to identify emerging contaminants and other viruses. So now the wastewater context in the Caribbean is something that, although I am, I would say, slightly familiar, in order to show to you some figures that have somehow been validated, these two slides are actually taken from some reports that were published by UNEP, by the Caribbean Development Bank, and by IDB, the Inter-American Development Bank. So basically, it has been estimated that as much of about 80%, 85% of wastewater entering the Caribbean Sea is currently under or untreated. Although these are old figures from 2006, this should be revised, but probably the percentage has now improved. But also there is a need for improving wastewater management, and this has been recognized by the wider Caribbean region in order to, as a responsibility or commitment to meet the obligations of the different protocols that exist in the region, like the Land-Based Sources and Activities Protocol, the LBS protocol. So basically what these reports have shown is that there is still significant constraints to primarily due to a lack of adequate, affordable financing for investments in wastewater management in the Caribbean region as a whole. So the provision of wastewater lags behind water supply. And as you can see, the coverage of the sector shows that only 22% of the population are connected to a centralized wastewater system. And some other treatments that are not connected to centralized systems comprise lot treatment through septic tanks and soak away, and the use of pit latrines. So this is still a practice that some rural communities are still doing. So now, in terms of percentages of wastewater treatment for those utilities that do have a centralized wastewater system, there are two examples. For instance, the example in Belize Water Services that has reported a high percentage of wastewater treated, and the National Water Commission of Jamaica that has reported 50% of wastewater treated. So this shows these percentages actually can be of any type of treatment, right? Primary, secondary, or tertiary. So we can discuss that later on. Another question for discussion. So as you can see, the situation in the Caribbean is not ideal, and there is much to be done in terms of upgrading systems, developing the network, building treatment plants, and without mentioning the so-called legal frameworks or regulatory frameworks that are also essential to ensure that wastewater treated or untreated that is discharged in the environment complies with the certain standards. So now I will move forward with the SDG framework and the 2030 agenda. And this is where we start seeing how international agencies of the United Nations and regional banks and other bilateral development agencies are using this framework to support countries and member states and institutions to make progress in the delivery in the achievement of these targets. And as you can imagine, this is the result of a very tedious, long, and in-depth consultation and consensus among countries and institutions. So this framework of targets, indicators for different goals are actually the result of a compromise. And these indicators, in many cases, do not represent the, let's say, tangible and real actions or even needs. So they may seem sometimes a bit reductive, right? So there is a very complex process behind, but of course, when you reduce so many variables and parameters and factors leading with water resources and different water systems that are interconnected with the hydrological cycle and the urban water systems and so on, it becomes almost impossible to have a clear indicator that would integrate all these diverse number of factors and parameters and variables. So let's put it this way. This framework is the best we have, right? And but of course, measuring the improvement of these targets with data and information becomes a real challenge. And we will see some of these difficulties through the presentation. So basically, within Sustainable Development Goal number 6, which is devoted to water, we have target 6.3, that is the reads like this: by 2030. That's the let's say the timeline or the deadline to make progress in these targets. The target is to improve water quality by reducing pollution, eliminating dumping, and minimizing release of hazardous chemicals and materials, halving the proportion of untreated wastewater, and substantially increasing recycling and safe reuse globally. So as you can see, these are all very extremely ambitious targets. And how do you measure implementation and progress? So basically, these agencies that are co-custodian of these targets, and in case of indicator 61, it is WHO, the World Health Organization, and UN Habitat, where I work. So basically, they broke down this target into indicators, one on proportion of bodies of water with good ambient water quality, and the other one is indicator 61 on the proportion of wastewater safely treated, right? So, and now there was a recent development, because this has again been kind of broken down in two categories. um, domestic wastewater and industrial wastewater flows safely treated. So we start to see the complexity of the issue, right? We have wastewater that is generated at the household level, but we also have wastewater that is generated at the through industrial activities and with different pollutants and different pollutants loads, and it becomes even more difficult to kind of disaggregate for the analysis. And also because it becomes more and more complex because some of the wastewater generated in the industry actually rejoins the sewer system that ends up being combined with household wastewater and treated together as a same volume of water in treatment plants. So as you can imagine, the challenge of just disaggregating data on volumes from each sector and water quality from each sector becomes a real challenge. So now the question is, we know that wastewater has been neglected. It's still being neglected in many countries or in many cities. But also it becomes essential to recognize the role and the importance of water utilities when it comes to produce reliable wastewater data records. That, as I said previously, can be useful to inform decisions, including, for instance, business plans, upgrading the infrastructure, etc., etc. I mean, increasing the number of connections and so on. So it is very important, at least it is for UN Habitat, to recognize the important role of water utilities. So utilities such as those you represent today can by no means be excluded from the overall discussion, right? So you have your own experience, you know what the challenges are, and there is, let's say, kind of a global network of actions, activities, processes, decision-making, data analysis, and so on, that depends very much on you. But this needs to be recognized. And actually, not many institutions today openly recognize and acknowledge that supporting utilities, both financially, institutionally, and in terms of human resources development, it's very difficult to have a clear picture of what's going on, and consequently to have a plan of action to improve the sector as a whole and to have some transformative actions put in place. At least this is my personal view, and this has been informed by years of working with professional associations such as CAWASA or CWWA in the Caribbean, and others in Latin America, in Africa, the Arab region, and Asia. So you have a lot to say, and you have a lot to contribute and put on the table for these, kind of global processes that seem somehow are a bit disconnected from reality. We have to be honest about that too. So at least the good news is that after a former framework of the Millennium Development Goals that ran from 2005 up to 2015, in that overall global framework for development and these Millennium Development Goals did not include wastewater at all, right? So this is an improvement. Now we have an agenda that runs from 2015 up to 2030, in which we have a dedicated target and a dedicated indicator on wastewater treatment. So this is progress, right? This is a step forward. But as I said before, the recognition that municipal, or in the case of Caribbean utilities, most of you are national in terms of covering the entire country. These are the services, the water services that are producing accurate and important data that, if properly collected and recorded, could be utilized to inform all these ongoing global monitoring efforts that I am presenting to you today. So from this perspective, it is essential not only to analyze existing utility data records where they are, but also to associate municipal and national water and wastewater utilities as partners in this global wastewater monitoring process, right? And this is why I really appreciate the opportunity that CAWASA has given me today to be able to preach this this message to you, right? And in somehow through this presentation to make you a part of this, right? So I realize I have to speed up a little bit here. So as I said before, utility data is essential to inform management decisions. Not only, of course, including investment, but not only. So basically, I will go through very quickly a number of slides here that show how this whole framework of monitoring has been structured, what are the assumptions and the definitions, right? And you may probably, from your technical eye, with your technical eye, you may spot some kind of, challenges. So basically, this is one of the diagram that shows conceptually how shows the different types of wastewater sources, how they are disaggregated by non-point sources and by wastewater generated by point sources. We have a domestic sector that includes also commercial. And then we have the industrial activities, right? And then we have collecting systems, different types, urban wastewater collecting systems, and independent wastewater collecting systems. And then we have types of treatment through a wastewater treatment plant, through independent treatments, and so on. And then we have the different types of discharges to the environment after treatment or without treatment in case there is a direct discharge to the environment. So basically, this is the framework, conceptual framework that is used by the United Nations Statistics Department that is in charge of sending questionnaires to the counterparts at the country level that are the national statistical offices, with a questionnaire with several questions on flows and volumes of wastewater, and they need to categorize following these definitions, right, or assumptions. So in terms of these sources of wastewater, they use the ISIC industry classification to classify industrial activities and then domestic activities. And then, sorry, okay, here. We have other variables or definitions that are used to define what wastewater treatment is, right? So basically, we have a treatment of wastewater in any non-public treatment plant. For instance, in industrial wastewater treatment plants, hotels, army camps, hospitals, which have their own treatment plants. Then we have, and of course, this leads to wastewater treated in what they call other treatment plants, and that can, of course, have their own level of treatment, primary, secondary, or tertiary. Then we have wastewater that is treated in urban wastewater treatment plants, and this is typically wastewater services that are operated by public authorities or by private companies. Then we have the set of wastewater that is treated in independent treatment facilities. So, for instance, septic tanks, right? And then we have sewage that comes with sludge production, so the dry matter, and non-treated wastewater. So basically, these are the variables that are considered. And then we have here some examples for Europe, and this is just to give you an example of how the information collected from the countries show these different categories of wastewater by sector, by total discharge of wastewater treatment plants, and then discharges. After the different categories, independent treatment or just treatment at the plants. These are just examples. This is by no means, this is illustrative of how the kind of endpoint information you may be able to show at the global level, right? And for instance, for wastewater data from the Caribbean, and the source of this is the United Nations Statistic Department. So this means that this data is data that has been provided officially by the national governments through the National Statistical Office, right? So as you can see, there is a diversity of issues here. Very few countries report. They have reported for a number of years and they have stopped reporting, or they have reported, for instance, total figures, or for instance, wastewater treatment that has been treated in a treatment plant, or that has been has received no treatment, and so on. So as you can see from this table, there is no harmonization at the globally about what a country does report. And of course, it's very difficult to make estimations and assumptions at the global level, but also at the regional level. In the case of the Caribbean, for instance, to have a sense of having an overview, or to be able to make some kind of comparisons of the progress made at the regional level, right? So, for instance, there are some cases where some countries also are reporting on quality of wastewater before and after treatment. So, for instance, some countries are reporting on COD or BOD, nitrogen and phosphorus, and some even are able to disaggregate this data, this quality data, in from sector, right? Municipal or non-municipal, or even domestic and industrial. So the more data we have on disaggregated data we have from different sectors and sources, and informing the type of treatment or the level of treatment the wastewater has received, the better we will be able to inform decisions in the countries. So basically, this is the bottom line message. And then some countries are even reporting or monitoring information on wastewater reuse, or treated wastewater reuse, right? So again, this is important to be able to consider, for instance, interventions in terms of environment conservation and ecosystems. So that's the end of my presentation. And here I have some take-home messages. So basically, I mean, for instance, in this framework, I didn't say this, and it's very important. This global monitoring process on wastewater that is led by UNSD, the Statistic Department, is actually not requesting countries to report on quality of wastewater. So basically, they are just in their questionnaire asking for flows and volumes, right? Of wastewater generated, wastewater collected, wastewater that enters the plant and that exits the plant with treatment. But no information is requested or asked on quantities of organic substances and parameters such as BOD and COD. So as you can see, the limitation is there. So, I mean, this is just a repetition of what I said, but as I said, having data, reliable data from different economic activities, for instance, may prompt a stricter enforcement of pollution laws and discharge permits. So you can see the connections and the relevance of having wastewater monitoring systems, right? So, and just to finish, one of the messages that I wanted to share with you is that some countries lack national targets, national legislation, national standards for the safe treatment of wastewater. But at least this global monitoring framework and the indicator 61 can be a good opportunity to create awareness by governments to develop these mechanisms, right? These wastewater monitoring systems, and then therefore, if countries make progress in this, we will be able to finally to have some regional estimates on wastewater, on water and wastewater management. So this is the end of my presentation. I realize I almost exhausted the time that was available for discussion, but if you have any comment, not necessarily a question, but if you have a comment, if you want to react to things I said, to agree or disagree, this will be very, very useful for also for the work that UN Habitat is going to do in the Caribbean in collaboration with CAWASA. So I thank you for your attention. I'm open for any comments or reaction. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jose. Folks, the floor is yours. Feel free to ask questions or add comments. And Jose, yeah, the time is good, but no worries. Our people usually would stick on if there's lots of information to give. And it's a process of sharing knowledge and to keep our operators occupied particularly during this period where we can hardly meet physically to exchange ideas and information. So the floor is open if you should have any questions or comments. I don't think that everyone has gone away. May I ask I know that one of these areas in the water sector or water and sanitation sector, we do not have the levels of investment. And of course, the statistics that you showed coming out, I think it's a bit, I think the last one of these was done by the CDB in 2013. And I think there was another bit of work done by the IDB maybe a couple of years after. So I recognize that we and agree that there is need for um, gathering a lot more information and getting the databases from the various utilities so that we can track what is going on, but in our coastal and marine environment in particular, which we are heavily dependent on as island nations. So I don't know if anyone on the chat room here now wish to make any comments about some of their systems, whether they have treated water or not, wastewater treated, or whether we have reuse taking place. The other thing we know too is that in the tourism sector, a lot of the hotel plants have established package or well their own treatment facilities. Some of them package plants where they do treat and recycle that water for, or it's reused in irrigation mainly. That's the best that I know of. I don't know if any of you participants here know of any other situation where there's reuse taking place. Any word from anyone? No.
No, hi, Nicole Austin speaking from
Hi,
Barbados
Nicole.
Water.
Yeah,
Hi.
good.
Right. From listening to the presentation and then with what you just added regarding the hotels that have their own treatment plants, as well as maybe a couple other places on as you said, small villas and stuff that are using it for irrigation. My question would come with, yes, we have operators that will be taking their daily logs and everything. They know you're going to be trying to collate this information. My thing is, not everyone is statistically trained. And my question for the UN Habitat, for you, Jose, with the UN Habitat will come with, when you have a sector that I agree with you that is not even getting maybe parts for maintenance, when you want to know, try to get time, because that's a collection and putting it together to give you what you may want statistically, you're now going to try to have a resource maybe within the organization or maybe outside like a consultant, the importance of that to pay for that person or like all of these things is what came to mind as you were speaking. um love the presentation, very informative. It just had me going wow and just thinking a lot. But then when it comes to working on the ground and knowing how stretched we are for human resources within the wastewater sector, water sector as well in the Caribbean, it when you want to know, pull somebody to do the statistics for you or to help you with the statistics, I saw that too as a big challenge within our region. I don't know, maybe not within our region, but definitely for Barbados, to have someone to take time away to do that, to help the UN Habitat and to understand what's going on within the region.
Yeah, thank you, Nicole. Yes, of course, this is this is a real challenge. I know that water utilities are actually already overwhelmed by you know, daily problems, emergencies, and you know, assuring the provision of the service. And when it comes to data collection and analysis, this may be seen as probably as a distraction for this scarce personnel that you may have in your utility. But I think that with proper awareness of the importance for the utility as a company to have some kind of be able to have some data, be able to analyze the data, that could be useful for instance, decision makers about investments or developments. It really pays back. It really pays back because you know, where there is no information, it's very difficult to make decisions, right? And I think that this is a process that requires many different contributions. It's not just the responsibility of the utility to do this analysis. It's a responsibility of national authorities that have the political responsibility to measure the quality of the water systems or the ecosystems where wastewater is discharged, for instance. So there is it's a shared responsibility, right? The utility measures the data, yes, but the analysis actually should be done already in collaboration with those institutions that can use the data. I'm thinking about environment agency or department, the health authorities, you know. So it's a collaborative process. Now, the question you may ask, Nicole, is that does every country has this kind of mechanism or collaborative kind of inter-department, inter-ministry, etc. mechanism to have this data, digest it, analyze it, assess it, and then show it in a way that, you know, politicians can understand and make decisions. It's a crucial question. I know from, for instance, in Mexico, CONAGUA is the water agency, right, at the national level in Mexico. And they didn't have a system to do that. Basically, the Ministry of Health was collecting their own data, Ministry of whatever, environment, and so on. Even within this water agency, they had different data from different sources. There was no harmonization. There was no methodology and no coordination between the different institutions that are part of this, you know, of the different governance levels, from the central government, the states, and the cities. So basically, they had to develop it, and it took years. But now they, with support from I think from WHO, they were able to create this capacity in the country. And now they, in 2018, they were able to publish a national report on water statistics. Can you imagine the amount of work, coordination, and resources that was put to be able to have one national report on water statistics? And by the way, I showed in one of the slides some of the information extracted from this report that shows disaggregated data on wastewater by sector, so meaning basically domestic and industrial, both in terms of volumes of wastewater and BOD and COD, right? So, but again, this has to do with capacity and human resources capacity and institutional capacity. And as you rightly pointed, it would go really in the direction to identify one person in each utility and train that professional to be able to collect this data, right? That is collected through the daily logs, and be able to do some kind of analysis and to first at least prepare a baseline of data, right? And then show progress and so on. This is my point of view, and I really appreciate your comment, Nicole. And this is something that I believe that, I mean, Ignatius should take note of, because when we organize some other webinars in the region with other institutions like IDB and CDB, these are actually very concrete suggestions that they should listen to, right? Or they should be aware of. So thank you very, very much, Nicole.
Yeah, that was a very good contribution from Nicole, and these are some of the realities that we face in the region. And as I pointed out, a lot of these studies to try to capture that information, there are bits of pieces of information that may be around, but to have the type of expertise within the utilities that you may not find. And so it seems particularly a lot of these types of gathering a lot of that information have been done by some of the multilateral agencies such as the Caribbean Development Bank and the Inter-American Development Bank. And for all intents and purposes, they have hired consultants to go around the region to go through the utilities and to be able to capture a lot of that and document it, because it's quite a bit of a challenge given the paucity of investments in sewage treatment and collection, etc. I mean, a lot of the investments you would find is still trying to catch up with water, and in fact getting more efficient in the delivery of water services. And so it's a big catch up with the sewage systems. And again, another thing you will find pretty much in the Caribbean region is that not many of the countries, except in the urban spaces, in the cities, would have central sewage systems where they may be able to either extrapolate or they can meter based on the amount of water consumed and the sewage disposed or treated. They're able to capture some of that, some bits and pieces of information about the volumes. But otherwise, it's mainly septic tank systems in a lot of parts of the countries in the region. And as you would have seen in some of the reports.
Yes, I have another comment on what Nicole said, and you also, Ignatius, mentioned that some of this information is captured by consultants that are basically engaged by multilateral, or regional financiers like the banks. But there is a limitation to that approach, is that if these exercises happen every 5, 6, 7 years, what you get is the picture in, for instance, the last one you have access to is from 2013. We are in 2021. And that was the picture at the time, right? But there is no possibility to measure progress or regression, in some cases, could be, about wastewater coverage or levels of treatment or percentages of wastewater treated. And so this is why I think utilities should do something with these data records, because they can actually build a baseline, right? And this baseline will increase every year, right? And then you will be able to have historical records with trends, and this is also very useful information. But these consultant reports tend to be time framed, right? And therefore they are, the analysis, the assessment they show is also very limited. Of course, it's better to have that than nothing, but I think really utilities should develop their baselines for internal purposes as much as for, you know, external communication or you know, presenting accurate data, reliable data to governments or to the concerned institutions that would need that data. And I mentioned environment, I mentioned health, to name probably the most relevant, right?
I think too that as you have I think most of the countries are reporting on the SDG targets. I think they're the national reports that are prepared per sector. So I think that is another instance where some bits of information would be captured by departments of sustainable development and environment in compiling those reports on the progress. I think it's done, I don't remember the frequency, but I think there's some of that being done to capture as much as possible, but still there's still a paucity of information as far as it relates to sewage.
Hi,
you know what? Oh, sorry.
Signature.
Yeah.
I wanted to say something again. Nicola here again.
Go ahead.
Right. No, when Jose just spoke, what came to me was when you have a consultant doing a report, or maybe even some of the other agencies, as you spoke about, like the Environment Protection Agency, or maybe the Ministry of Health, and then you have the water utility company doing a report for themselves. What you're gonna have, you usually have a report based off what they wanted, what each individual person wanted, separate and distinct from what may help the actual water utility company. And I think that maybe when the UN Habitat comes into the region, that they can speak better on how this data, this baseline that you spoke of, Jose, can help the utilities work. Because honestly, all we really do is out a lot of fires every single day. We out fires, or we just catching our tails out in fires. That is what we do nearly every day. And then you're being asked to do a report and give us this data. That's how we feel. And I think that if you came in speaking to show how this data and this baseline can possibly do better with our maintenance, prevention of stop preventing us from having to out so many fires, but actually show, as you said, trends, show how things can work better for us as, you know, utility companies being run by government. Because as I said, it's lack of funds or fund. We know we want these things. We put them in the budget. We don't get them. And then we are out in a fire because of something that we asked for earlier, up in like 2 years ago, still haven't received it. So I would love that maybe, as I said, when CDB comes and IDB comes with their money and they give us consultancy fees so that we can generate a report, they get the report, they walk away with it. And then we still don't get the understanding of how that data could have worked to maybe give us when we ask for something in a budget, that we could get it. So I don't know if maybe y'all could tackle that, like when y'all come into the region. You said you're doing it soon. I don't know if maybe when you'll come in to try to get us to help with reports, that if you can try to appeal to maintenance, financing, to realize that when that data collection can also show you how often things break down, how often they might need to be replaced, and speak to them in dollars and cents, because honestly, we as operators, all we do is out fires and try to fix things with super glue because we're not getting what we want on the ground. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you very much for that, Nicole. This is and that will be pretty useful for us, Jose, in when I think next we plan to have these sessions with the water utility managers and other lead actors in other partners with your presentations in the region to start off this project.
Yeah, absolutely. This is very, very useful. And I mean, it confirms, Nicole, you confirm what the our assumptions are in other parts of the world. So, you know, what your own experience in Barbados is actually very similar to other countries all over the world. But that shows that there is a gap, right? And this gap has to be filled, or otherwise this means that someone is not paying attention to these issues, and they deserve, actually they deserve. But you said something that resonates a little bit with what something that actually I didn't say, because in my presentation, I spoke about investments and the environment and so on, but there is another very important area where this data is important, as you said, is for the proper management of the system and infrastructure you're working with. And I think I mentioned it, but you know, one of the potential benefits of having monitoring system of wastewater is, for instance, I mentioned to alert from possible treatment malfunction, right? So, or problems in the infrastructure. So there are many benefits that can actually be derived from this. Now, to be very concrete and probably to conclude, I think what is missing is to have develop a common methodology or protocol, or we can call it as we please, but a procedure of a way of doing things in order to, for instance, for utilities in the Caribbean and operators to have a common sense of how this data collection should be done, which parameters are more essential than others, which frequency is more relevant than other, and to have some kind of, you know, capacity training for utilities and operators to be able to develop these baselines, right? And these data for your own internal purposes. And then, of course, this can serve to higher, you know, purposes. And yeah, that's also the point. That's also the objective. But I think that what is missing, and probably others have done it, but some very simple methodology or a questionnaire that can be filled on a daily basis by the operators in, you know, collecting those data logs. A very simple tool that could, at the end of the day, show good use, you know, show to be something efficient. I don't know. We should discuss this further with Ignatius and see how we could probably think of a very simple train activity that could put all these things on the table again. More more practical and less, you know, abstract, as part of my presentation was about all these, you know, big global indicators. But you know, I mean, we can discuss data management, and I think this is very important. And yeah, I mean that's my wish. I hope.
Okay, well,
this will
thanks a
be the
lot.
case.
I think yes, it is. I think I very much like a lot of Nicole's input here, and bringing a lot of things into perspective. I think in the first instance, as we planned to have this meeting of the the CEOs and managers of the utilities, as you're going to present to them the project, and looking at the way to commence implementation. I think along the way, I think it would be also useful to have a session like this for many of the people who are managing the plants or the operators themselves, because they are the people who do the nuts and bolts and can, who will really have to be dealing with the data collection and would be able to guide the way in establishing the way forward. So we'd like to thank everyone who've stayed on for almost 90 minutes, and thank you, Jose, for giving us your time. This is Wednesday CAWASA webinars, which begins at 4 and ends. We normally go 4 to 5 p.m. or 1 hour. Sometimes we go into 90 minutes. But this is the first in the series for this year. And we look forward to seeing you again in the near future, Jose. We certainly have you back with us. And
yes.
also our participants, we look forward to having you join us next week, same time. I'm Ignatius Jean signing off. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you. Good evening. Bye-bye.